Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Good evening, everybody. Nice to see you again. In the last week or so, I've given a few Dhamma talks in Singapore. Many of you will know, those who attended the talks, that I like to place an emphasis upon the importance of a daily meditation practice, especially starting the day with meditation. Have encouraged people to practice being a little more circumspect with the devices, the phones, the tablets, internet time, social media, etc. Try to protect the mind, have a bit more sense restraint, because indriya samvara, sense restraint, makes for a powerful mind, a mind that's not too restless or agitated or distracted. Encourage people to go to bed a bit earlier so that you can get up a bit earlier and meditate before your work. We don't just keep the practice to the formal meditation. The formal meditation serves the function of helping to sharpen the quality of the mindfulness, develop a deeper, more resilient sense of presence of mind. After that, we set the intention to carry that mindfulness with us throughout the day. This is very important. If you start the day with formal practice and start the day setting the intention that we are training in being mindful of all postures and in being mindful of thought, speech and action. It's many people's experience that if they can be consistent, they really do this for a period of time, that mental clarity does increase and improve. There is more of a presence of mind. Something that can be frustrating for people is that there's often an assumption that the more we meditate, the more happiness we will experience. And ultimately that's true. It's not necessarily true in the short term, in the beginning stages. In the beginning stages, as clarity develops, we probably notice how many of our thoughts are unskillful and just how much desires we have. And people can get a bit disheartened. It's important to understand that this is actually growth, a growth in clarity, what we call in the Pali sati sampajanya, mindfulness and clear comprehension, a growth in awareness of what is a wholesome quality, what is a neutral quality, what is an unwholesome quality, a growth in understanding of what is worth pursuing and not worth pursuing. And in order to have that growth in clarity and understanding, we do have to see the unwholesome as the unwholesome. As we contemplate the Four Noble Truths and cultivate the Eightfold Path, we do need to become mindful of dukkha. And a lot of people, most people in the world are trying to fill up their experience with as much pleasure as possible. Most people don't really want to have a good look at unsatisfactoriness, pain, suffering, dukkha. They will distract themselves from it, try to fill up the hole with pleasure, or blame others for it. None of those strategies work ultimately. There's a reason I'm sure there's a reason Lord Buddha placed the Four Noble Truths in that order. Like a good doctor, you have to acknowledge the symptom. You have to see the disease before you can give a prognosis and prescribe the medicine. So we have to have a look at the fact that as conscious beings born into a conditioned world, we have to associate with the disliked. We have to be separated from the liked. We are subject to things like illness, there is pain in the body, as well as happiness, joy, contentment. There is sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair. As mature human beings, as spiritual grown-ups, we have a good look at that. And the reason we have a look at it is Lord Buddha explains that it is possible to go beyond dukkha, but we have to understand the cause. The cause, of course, is our clinging, our craving, and our attachment. And probably a large cause of suffering is unreasonable expectations. So when we develop mindfulness of what a body is, what a mind is, what the human realm is, we develop more reasonable expectations, I think, of the kind of pleasure and happiness that can be had. And since there's not that much pleasure and happiness that can be had in a conditioned world, we aspire for something better. And fortunately for us, we do have what we need to cultivate qualities, practices, accumulate the merits, etc., that will lead us to something better. Lord Buddha abbreviates his training as Dana Sila Pavana, a path of being generous, ethical, virtuous, and cultivating the mind. He also describes his teaching as the Dhamma and Vinaya, his truth about the instructions, about the nature of conditions, how to realize the unconditioned. But he often describes it as the Dhamma Vinaya, the ethical standards that we must keep and the practices that we must do in order to realize the third noble truth, cessation from suffering. Perhaps not in the beginning stages of practice, but I would say in the middle stages of practice, a person can start to glimpse what Lord Buddha is talking about when he talks about the cessation of suffering. That might occur as what we call vipassana jnana, insight knowledges. What's an insight knowledge? So if you have good mindfulness and you're meditating quite a bit, contemplating perhaps the impermanence of feelings, the impermanence of thoughts, or having a good look at pain in the body, dukkha vedana, as well as pleasure in the body, rapture. When mindfulness gets good, becomes clear, powerful, there can be a sense of separating that which knows from that which is known, a sense of letting go. And when that letting go occurs, a sense of self can disappear. And then we can glimpse as practitioners what Lord Buddha is really pointing to. It's the assumption for worldly beings is that we're going to be able to make conditions work to find us a place within the conditions where we can be comfortable. That is not the case. It is the case that when we become mindful of the nature of conditions and the mind is able to see conditioned phenomena as conditioned phenomena and not identify with it, then the mind begins to experience space, temporary liberation from it. So most people probably experience this in a retreat context, would be the most likely situation if somebody's meditating 7, 8, 9, 10 days. As the days progress, as the mindfulness becomes better, not feeding the sense of self, not feeding ignorance, not going with the desire for comfort and distraction, then as that clarity gets sharper, a sense of samadhi, some collectedness, the mind gets more energy, and then it's able to let go of its identification with the body as being a self, identification with feelings as being I and mine, identification with thoughts as being I and mine, and the mind can experience a sense of letting go, not grasping. Sense of self can disappear for a period of time. Sometimes it might be just for a few seconds. But this is a very important experience for practitioners to have, because until we have that experience, we don't yet understand the way Lord Buddha describes self-view as a view. But when the practitioner can experience the body and the mind with the self-view not present, And also one notices that when the self-view isn't present, when the habitual grasping isn't present, there's no suffering. That's when we understand, that's what the Buddha's pointing to. When I don't grasp at these five khandhas as being I and mine, when I let go, when I have enough mindfulness to let go of identifying with them, when I have enough samadhi to rest in a space which knows them according to their nature, sense of self disappears, there's no one there to suffer. And then of course the sense of self comes back and it becomes a story, a great meditation I had, nice experience I had, you go and tell your friends, and then suffering comes back. But at least we glimpse it's true. Self-view is a view, it's a habitual way of seeing things, it's not ultimate truth. And then also other ways that we can get a break from unsatisfactoriness is of course with samatha practices, with a bit of samadhi, when we can pacify, lessen, weaken the degree to which the mind is affected by the five hindrances, craving for, craving not for, irritation, aversion, sleepiness, restlessness, worry, or doubt. When we meditate correctly, skillfully, we're with our meditation object, mindfulness gets better, hindrances get less. Perhaps a person can go beyond the hindrances for a period of time. During that time, there's no coarse suffering. This is another type of temporary liberation from the hindrances. And most people, if they practice enough to experience this, have a very clear sense that the pleasure that comes from mental cultivation is superior to the pleasure that comes from sensuality, is superior to the pleasure that comes from peak experience. Because with an experience of samadhi, the mind feels cool, content, and full. It doesn't feel hot with hunger and craving and desire. After coming out of an experience of having some samadhi, that quality of coolness and tranquility tends to last for a period of time. There's no bitter aftertaste, there's no nasty withdrawal symptom. In the beginning stages, it may be the case that if you meditate for half an hour, 40 minutes, an hour, you may experience 5 minutes of peacefulness a couple of times. That's quite normal. And we should be encouraged by this. This means that the mind is capable of experiencing some peacefulness. If we are consistent with our practice, and if we increase our sessions from 1 to perhaps 2 sessions, or 3 ultimately, it's probably going to be the case that you will experience peacefulness for 20 minutes. It might be that there's some restlessness, some habitual hindrances for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then the mind attains to some peace for about 20 minutes, and then comes out, has a few thoughts again, and then we can derive greater encouragement that it is true that if we are consistent and if we keep making good efforts at this practice, that the depth of the peacefulness, the duration of the peacefulness gets longer, gets deeper. One of the benefits of experiencing some samadhi, some collectedness, is that when we then apply that extra energy to being mindful of thoughts, speech, actions, what we're doing with our body, our quality of mindfulness tends to get better. And we are consistently mindful throughout the day. We tend to be more careful with our speech, more restrained with our thoughts, less distracted. And that supports the meditation so that when we come to do another session, the mind will become more peaceful more easily. One of the most important things for practitioners is consistency. So these results that I'm talking about, the going from 5 minutes of peacefulness to 20 minutes of peacefulness, on a daily basis, most days, that comes from being consistent with the practice and being consistent with the precepts. It is a training. People will make mistakes. We have to have compassion, but we don't make excuses for ourselves. It's like, okay, you made a mistake, don't do it again. Okay, you slacked off for a while, pick it up. So I wanted to give a little synopsis of some of the things I've been talking about this past week. And now we're going to shift gears. I'm going to talk about something else, some other things. Different monks will have different characters, different practitioners will develop different perspectives, and different people will talk about different things. And I believe there is strength in diversity. That's the power of Sangha, because there are a variety of types of practitioners. Different people need different skillful means. Different people have different character traits. So I want to talk a little bit tonight about some more of what one might call faith-based or devotional practice. And first of all, I would like to say, for those who are very... If you're someone who has studied the suttas, the main suttas, the three cardinal suttas, the suttas on the four foundations of mindfulness, the Anapanasati Sutta, etc., and if you're very confident in the suttas and you have a committed practice and you do some Pali chanting and you're content with your Pali chanting, wonderful. You may not need some of the things that I'm going to recommend, but if you're someone who needs a bit more encouragement or a bit more help, some people have said to me in the past week that they commit to the meditation, but that it can feel really dry sometimes, or they can commit to the meditation and it feels like just one more thing that they have to do. It's not very joyful. They've already got all these duties they have to do, and now they have to meditate 2 hours a day as well. And it's hard. So it is recommended that we give a bit more attention to samatha practices. So samatha practices are practices that brighten the mind, uplift the mind, and also lead to samadhi. Faith can be very helpful in energizing the mind, in bringing a quality of joy to the mind. I think it's probably the case that most of the Western disciples of Luang Por Chah who have lived in Thailand will have focused on sutta and will have focused on formal practice and will have focused on the kinds of thing I was talking about for the first 15 minutes. But most of those venerables left Thailand after about 10 years. I myself have lived in Thailand for 30 years, and I have Thai citizenship also. And as someone who's lived in Thailand for a long time, more than half my life in fact, I have observed the richness of Thai Buddhism. It has many skillful means, and there are many practices, and it's a very rich, more than 1,000 years of practice. So, for example, traditionally most Thai people in a village will have a little house in the corner of their garden which is for the Bumma Devas. And they will offer some incense sticks and something sweet or a flower to the Bumma Devas in their yard every day. They understand that the Bumma Devas were there first. Bumma Devas probably have a longer lifespan than humans. They came and built a house. They understand that the Bumma Devas can perhaps change the size of their body. So they make a little house for them, and they make gifts to them. And then many people, when they go to the temple, I'm talking about the villagers, not necessarily the Bangkok people, but the villagers, they will say in their mind, okay, Devas, come to the temple, make merit with me. And so the reason I mention this is that Devanusati, recollection of deities or the existence of Devas, is basic background accepted reality to Thai Buddhists. Probably 90% of Thai people to this day still believe in the existence of Bumma Devas and still make offerings to them. These lovely flower garlands that you see all around the place, that they offer to the Devas. Lord Buddha explained that recollection of deities is a skillful practice for those who have faith in them. Why? Because as we develop some affection, a sense of appreciation and care for the Devas, they develop that for us too. the devas, you become known to the devas if you think about them. Now, I'm not suggesting that people become obsessed with it. I'm just suggesting that people include it. Because in a time, I don't know how you feel about the place the world is in at the moment and where we might be going. But things look a bit dark to me. And it's always good to be optimistic and hopeful. But we also have to pay attention. And I think we are in a period of geopolitical volatility. I think we are in a period of rapid change, technology-wise. We don't really know what implications that will have for us in terms of the economy, in terms of employment, in terms of income. And if times get tough or harder, then having a good number of tools in your spiritual toolbox will be helpful to you. Although I was talking just now about if we can be consistent with our practice and have a good quality of mindfulness, we can glimpse and experience not self, spaciousness, liberate the mind temporarily, and that is the focus, that is our goal. Because if we can experience that more and more, it will eventually lead to having a penetrative insight into Nibbana that destroys delusion and liberates the mind. We try to do this. But much of your experience will be of being a conventional being in the conventional world who has hopes and fears and struggles. You don't walk around experiencing not self all day, as far as I'm aware, as far as I can tell. I know some people who do. That's my tremendous good fortune. So sometimes you might need encouragement, you might need uplifting, you might need to do something that brightens the mind. And this is where Devanusati can be helpful. I think for Theravadan Buddhists, to consider Maitreya Bodhisatta is a helpful practice. If this world gets darker, if beings in this world have less and less sila, and you look at the news and you hear like how many people are involved in things like human trafficking and illegal arms trading. I think the biggest business in the world, I think, is arms, and the second biggest business is human trafficking. That's a large part of the economy in this world, unfortunately. So we can deduce from this that we are living in a dark age. This is not a brightening age. This is not the time when Maitreya will be coming. Unfortunately, things might get worse before they get better. So what do you do as a practitioner to brighten your mind, to keep your mind upright? I think there are several things we can do. One thing which is very, very helpful and very, very important is to understand, to have true and deep faith in Buddhas and their liberation. After that, we have faith and confidence in our ability to accomplish the same thing, the same liberation, not necessarily having the same qualities and abilities, but certainly the same liberation. That's what Lord Buddha says about the Arahants. They have the same quality of liberation as him. So beings who cultivate dana, sila and bhavana consistently without giving up, they will realize liberation, the same liberation as the Buddha. So we have confidence in that. This is our refuge. The reason we don't want to compromise on our sila, even though it seems that presidents do, prime ministers do, movie stars do, singers do, actors do, seems like almost everybody does. The reason we don't is because we want to honor our potential and we want to support our potential so that we can realize our potential. Short-term worldly goal, worldly success, if it leads to hell, isn't worth it, is it? But it might be the case, I know it's the case, sometimes people have to quit a job that they were having success in because the day came when they were going to have to lie or cooperate with someone else's corruption. I know many people who've had to quit their job because they didn't want to be involved in corruption. And this is noble. This is going against the grain of the world. And this is what leads to heaven and beyond. Strict adherence to virtue, protecting your virtue, nurturing your virtue, because virtue is the foundation for your insight that will liberate you. But if things get dark, sometimes it can be helpful to pray. You might feel like you need to pray to something. And I think as Theravadan Buddhists, to consider that Maitreya Bodhisattva is in Tushita heaven, and that he has full, boundless loving kindness for all beings everywhere without exception, that he has cultivated virtue for 16 asankhya and 100,000 eons, and he did that in order to help liberate beings, I think you can feel fairly confident that Maitreya cares. And it's just nice to think about that sometimes, when things down here seem pretty dark. There is a chant that Thai people often chant called the Jina Panjara Gatha. The Jina Panjara Gatha was composed, I believe, in Sri Lanka. I think it was composed at Abhayagiri Monastery. Somdet Do, a famous monk from Thailand, discovered the text and made an abbreviated version of it. And many Thai people chant this chant every day. It's like a Theravadan mandala, where you visualize 28 Buddhas above your head, various arahants in different parts of your body, suttas around you. You think about it, it sounds a bit silly to an academic mind. But to a person who has faith who might be struggling, to think of the Buddhas above your head, the disciples around your body, the suttas around you like a protective rampart, I think it's described as, it's encouraging, it's uplifting, it's something you can do when you feel the darkness is creeping in all around you. There's something you can do to protect yourself. There's one lady in the village where I go for alms who has chanted the Jina Panjara Gatha 3 times a day for 30 years. It's her devotional practice. Apparently, some very gifted monks who I know in Thailand told me that Somdet Do was the incarnation of Maitreya in Thailand 100 or so years ago. And he made a pledge that anybody who chants this chant, he will protect them. It's just a nice thing to know that, the Mahayanas have Kuan Yin, the Tibetans have Chenrezig. We can have Maitreya, the future Buddha, as Theravadins. You can trust. It's in the suttas. Shakyamuni Buddha, Gautama Buddha, talks of the coming Buddha Maitreya, who will have the most metta of all Buddhas. It's said that Maitreya will have so much metta he'll be able to put out the flames of hell for a period of time and teach hell beings, the only Buddha who will have been able to do so. It's just nice to think about these things. Another thing we can think about sometimes, if it's helpful, is that the number of beings who became stream enterers in the time of the Buddha and who were born in heaven is many tens of thousands. So sometimes we can get a bit depressed. There's not so many arahants left. There's some scandals in the Sangha. So then we think about and then if you consider the beings that Lord Buddha taught in heaven, and then I think it's not an exaggeration to understand that there are millions of Aryan Devas in heaven, millions. So if you're looking around and things look dark and the gates of hell are opening up and the demons are rushing in from every side, then you look upwards. Millions of Devas. And if you might not be able to see them yet, but you can at least be confident at heart. And it's a nice thing to consider. Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Sangha is not just the well-practiced monks and nuns wearing a chivara, a robe. It is beings that have attained to one of the stages of enlightenment. That means those millions of devas who are stream enterers and sakadagamis and anagamis, they are part of your Sangha. That means your Sangha refuge composes millions, probably tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions of Aryan Devas. You consider the Devas have very long lives, and there was Buddhas before this. There was Siki and Wesabu 20 eons ago. There was Kakusanda, Konagamana, Kassapa before our Buddha. All of those Buddhas had many stream enterer disciples that were reborn in heaven. So I don't think it's a stretch to accept that there are hundreds of millions of Aryan Devas. So sometimes you can just think about that, like, I rejoice in the goodness of the hundreds of millions of Aryan Devas and smile. You know, if you've seen some bad news and you're feeling a bit depressed, it's a nice way to respond. Another being that Theravadins can bring to mind is Sakadeva Raja, king of the Devas. I enjoy when Sakadeva Raja appears in the life of the Buddha story. In fact, I might even say he's my favorite Sotapanna. Indra's cool. And I have something of an artist's sensibilities. I appreciate art. So Indra, when the Buddha had taught the 1,000 matted hair ascetics, he taught them the fire sermon on the banks of the Naranjara river in Gaya, and there were 1,000 more arahants in the world. The Buddha returned to Rajgir. You may remember the story. Siddhartha left the palace and he wandered through Rajgir, and King Bimbisara noticed his beautiful, graceful mannerisms and his noble bearing, and he told his driver, follow that. That's a noble warrior, that's no ordinary renunciant. Follow him, see where he goes. He followed him, came back, told the king mounted a carriage, the king went to see the Bodhisattva, and he said, you are a man of noble bearing, I'm impressed with your gait, with your grace, with your presence. Where are you from? And then he asked him, please share rulership of my kingdom, I give you half. Do you imagine how impressive the presence of the Bodhisattva was? The Bodhisattva said, I do not want these worldly things, I see danger in them, they're bound up with birth, aging and death. I am looking for the deathless. King Bimbisara said, Sadhu, okay, you can have the whole kingdom. The Bodhisattva said, you don't understand me, I don't want this. I'm looking for something better, I'm looking for the unconditioned. And then King Bimbisara said, well, when you find it, come back and teach me, show me. Obviously, King Bimbisara and the Bodhisattva probably built quite a bit of virtue together over many lives. So the king was in position. The Bodhisattva was striving in his kingdom. So the Buddha knew he was welcome in the kingdom of Rajgir, and he was walking there. So apparently, Sakadeva Raja appeared in the form of a Brahmin youth and walked in front of the Buddha as he entered Rajgir, dancing and reciting a poem. Now, not anybody gets to do that. You have to be someone special to get to do that, right? And the Buddha would have known, this is the king of the Devas, only he can dance and sing in front of me. And he did. And I think it's beautiful that the king of the Devas recites a poem and dances, brings in this leader of men, teacher of gods and humans. At a later occasion, also in Rajgir, Indra came and asked some questions to the Buddha, and it is explained that Sakadeva Raja attained the Dhamma eye while listening to the Buddha's answers. So Sakadeva Raja attained to a level of enlightenment. So I know it's a bit, we want to be careful which deity we start praying to or thinking about, because you aspire for liberation. But if you know from the suttas that a particular deity is established in enlightenment, that's one you can trust. That's part of your refuge of Sangha. So for myself, I like to think of Saka, I like to think of Maitreya. To do so is encouraging. And sometimes, if you need help, I think I told you last week the story of my going to the Emerald Buddha because I felt I needed more help, and I made the request. You know, the Barami of the Buddha, the Devas that protect the Sasana, I want to be a monk for my whole life, but I'm going to need more help. If there is a master who can help me, may I meet him? And 3 weeks later, Ajaan Anan came to the jungle where I was staying. It's the only time that he went there. I do believe that these things can be effective as well. In the early days of Wat Marp Jan, Ajaan Anan's monastery, one night a green light appeared above the Dhamma hall and shone very brightly for an hour or so, and people saw it 5 kilometers away. And they asked what it was. And this was Indra's jewel, this was Sakadeva Raja blessing the monastery. It's one of those things you might not hear, many people might not tell you, but Ajaan Achalo will tell you on his last talk in Singapore. And I think some monks should talk about these things, because the world is becoming so material. People are so obsessed with technology. And I want to remind you that there's things better than tech, heaven and beyond. So Ajaan Anan actually asked me a few years ago, he said to me, he told me about that experience, and he says, I want to have a statue of Indra in the monastery. I want to have a vihara with Indra in the monastery, Sakadeva Raja, because then his blessings will be able to stick to the statue and it will help the monks practice. Isn't that interesting? So there is a beautiful statue made of green Rajasthani marble that Ajaan Achalo and his students offered to Ajaan Anan, so that the blessings of the king of the Devas can help the monks in their meditation. Just thought I'd mention that. It's tucked away to the side, it's not central, nobody's presenting this as the center of Buddhism, something that everybody has to give attention to, but if it's helpful, one can wander to the side and go and sit meditation with the Indra statue. Many people find it helpful. Some people, particularly Chinese people, most of you have these ethnically Chinese faces, may have a latent karmic connection with other bodhisattvas. You may have grown up with images on your shrine. If you don't want to be a Buddha, you don't want to follow the bodhisattva path, fine, but it doesn't mean you can't say the occasional prayer or ask for a bit of help. Like if you understand that a high-level bodhisattva remains in the world to help. And I don't think the bodhisattvas would be like, if you don't want to be a Buddha, I'm not going to help you. It's like, the way I understand it, if somebody aspires for quick arahantship, I think a bodhisattva will say, sadhu, there's one being I don't have to help. And I think if you ask for some assistance, Kuan Yin, Manjushri, help me become an arahant quickly, if they can help, they probably will. That's just my opinion. One practice we can also do, if you want to work mostly with Buddha Barami, which I support, if you want to work with the Barami of Buddhas, a practice that Luang Por Liem and Ajaan Anan have been encouraging is reciting the Itipiso chant 108 times. Luang Por Liem tends to do Itipiso, the praises to the Buddha, praises to Dhamma, praises to Sangha. It takes about 2.5 hours. Luang Por Anan tends to do just the first verse. It takes about 40 minutes. One can do that as a bit of a devotional practice, just to assert one's faith in the Buddha, assert one's love, respect, gratitude in the Buddha, assert that this is your refuge. You can do it 36 times, 3 times a day, for example, energetically, loudly, just the praises to the Buddha. If your mind is struggling with some dejection or some darkness or some hopelessness or some just weariness about what samsara is, brighten the mind, energize the mind, do something. Don't let the mind hang out in a dejected, depressed state. Even though it appears that the whole world is going to hell, you shouldn't. You have enough merit to have met the Buddha's sasana, and you should aspire to heaven and beyond. If they're going to hell, okay, they might not be able to do much. But you can do something about your mind. Once I was at an interesting experience. I was supervising the building of the abbot's kuti. I didn't study engineering or architecture, but sometimes I like a challenge. I was laying the bricks myself. It just was during COVID. and I had a few things I wasn't quite sure what to do when it came to making the roof, etc. So I was attending the chanting of the 108 Itipisos at Luang Por Liem's monastery. And about halfway through the chanting, I just had this thought, you can do such and such and such and such with that part of the building. Like the answer came. And then another 20 or so minutes, and then another answer. And that part you can do such and such and such and such. It was really interesting because I wasn't thinking about the kuti and I was chanting Itipiso very loudly with faith. And these thoughts occurred. Now, afterwards I went and I asked Luang Por Liem, because I always do, what came, did anything special come? So you don't know, the monks also do this. And he said, yeah, the Buddhists came, and then he said something interesting. He said, and Ganesha also came tonight. Now what's interesting about that is, you might not know this, but people who study architecture in Thailand pray to Ganesha, even though they're Buddhists. They believe that Ganesha is a deity that helps with design. So there I was chanting my Itipisos, and I was building a kuti, and some thoughts occurred to me. And I asked Luang Por Liem, and Luang Por Liem said, Ganesha came tonight. Well, I don't know if you find that interesting, but I did. The Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha is my refuge, and if Ganesha wants to help me, I'm fine with that. So I just thought I'd mention a few of these things to encourage you. Feel free to do your daily practice if the mind... Try to protect your mind from dejection, depression, feeling forlorn, feeling weary, because the fact is, you have a lot of merit, you have a great opportunity. Whether or not you feel that all the time, whether or not you remember that all the time, that's a different thing. But we have to keep remembering it, we have to keep reminding ourselves. And this is one of the reasons I recommend limiting the time on the device, because most of what you will see on it is pretty depressing and not very uplifting. So if you need to watch the occasional video about kittens, that's okay. I also do this. But if you want to go higher than that, use your own mind to recollect the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the Devas who are part of the Sangha, those who remain of well practice. And another thing I wanted to say is, if you hear more and more scandals about bad monks, bad nuns, corruption, etc., it doesn't mean that there's no good monks left. It means that, but what it does mean, if I may say so myself, what it means is that those few good monks and nuns who are left are more valuable, not less valuable. We're more rare now. So don't think, they're all bad, there's nothing good left. Throw it out, because you might be throwing out the baby with the bathwater. There are still good monks and nuns. They're not necessarily the ones on TV. They're in the forests, they're on the mountains, they're being quiet, they're meditating. And I know hundreds. So please feel confident that there are still some good monks and nuns. And I would recommend, if there's bad news about monks, just don't look at it. Because those aren't monks, actually. They're just wearing robes. But the ones that you know who are good monks, you think of those ones. Okay? Satu. I offer this for your... Hope something was useful.
Handamayam o vadakatha sadhu karang kadamase sadhu 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 anumodhami.
So now we open up for questions from anyone. Anyone with questions, you can raise your hand.
Thank you for your kind teaching, Ajahn.
You're welcome.
Just, heard before you mentioned that 15% of your practice is Mahayana.
Right.
Can you share with us what that is about? Thank you.
When I was 3 months a monk, I had trained with Luang Por Pasano at Wat Nong Pah Pong, and he went to help establish a Vajiranyanamuni Monastery in California, along with Ajahn Amaro. I went to live with him for my 4th and my 5th rainy season retreat. When I arrived at a Vajiranyanamuni, I was informed that the community would be going to attend the Dalai Lama's teachings in Los Angeles. So it simply seems to be part of my karma because I didn't ask to attend. I was enrolled. And then 2 weeks later, we were on the stage 5 meters from the Dalai Lama for 4 days. And he gave a commentary on a text, Tisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. And there was a big tanka of white Tara. And what's interesting is I'd been the librarian at Wat Nong Pah Pong, and I'd seen this book about Tara, and I'd picked it up and I'd looked at the cover and I'd put it back on the shelf, and I'd thought, we're Theravadan, we don't do deities. I'd never opened the book. And then I was sitting on the stage and there's this huge picture of Sankara of Tara, and I liked her. I liked her. And he gave, His Holiness gave a long life blessing for white Tara. And I started to do some of her mantras, and I found it helpful. I found it brightening and uplifting. It felt almost like Theravada Buddhism in the initial stages, before a person starts to get some samatha, some peace, some insights, it can be hard work and a bit dry. And living with idealistic, competitive, fault-finding, sometimes macho Western monks isn't that fun, to be honest. Particularly in the first couple of years. And I won't mention their names, but no, I won't. I don't go there. Don't go there. But I found it helpful to imagine a being who had compassion and tenderness, who wished me well, who wasn't judging me, who would stick around until samsara ended, until I was liberated. It's just a nice, oh, that's nice. That's different to somebody sneering at me and saying I'm not good enough. It's like a beautiful archetype of the perfect mother. And a lot of Chinese would see Kuan Yin that way, as a blessing, and Mother Kuan Yin. So I did start doing some mantra as a daily practice. And then when I was visiting my parents in Australia, at a certain point His Holiness started to come to Australia more regularly, about 15 years ago, and I would time my visit to see my parents with when His Holiness was there. And they would often ask me to contribute. I would lead a guided meditation before the Dalai Lama's teachings. I would sometimes attend a panel discussion group. I would chant the Mangala Sutta at his request to open the teachings. So I developed something of a rapport. And he also gave the male Avalokiteshvara blessing, 1,000-armed, the Om Mani Padme Hum. So I do a couple of those mantras. But my main practice is Buddha, breath meditation, body contemplation, metta, aware of death, all of the classic. But I do some mantra and a little bit of Devanus. I consider it Devanusati. And Thana Ajahn Anan said that the Mahayana and the Vajrayana will talk about pure lands, and Thana Ajahn Anan said they are actually in Tushita heaven. So I would see them as Tushita Devas. And every now and then it's nice to think of a being with boundless compassion that exists in samsara to help people, not judge them, to bless them, to give them whatever they need. It's just a nice complementary practice. And of course now I love my idealistic, competitive, macho, fault-finding friends, because we depend upon feedback from others to improve ourselves. And it's difficult in the beginning, but after a while it's like, yeah, I should live by high standards, and I should have friends who have high standards, and I should be willing to hear feedback if I've got some faults. And so now I'm mostly grateful. Yeah.
Good evening, Ajahn.
Hello.
Please could you speak a little bit on how Padipati Puja is the highest offering? Please could you speak a little bit on how Patipati Puja is the highest offering one can make out of all offerings, please?
Right,
Thank
so-
you.
How is the offering of practice the highest practice? So they are linked, of course. Like one does have to do a certain amount of dana to brighten the mind, and a certain amount, one does have to have virtue for one's practice to develop. But when one does practice, it's, if I could use a visual, like an analogy, it's like when you make a generous offering and you feel good about that generous offering, and in that moment your mind is bright and happy. If you have faith in what you're offering, why you're offering it. When you keep your ethical precepts and you are virtuous, there is the happiness of freedom from remorse. There is more contentment. The power of the kilesa in the mind is less, so the mind is less oppressed by kilesa for living within that healthy container. But when you get skilled at meditation objects, like the mind gets, if you're experiencing qualities like rapture and tranquility and peacefulness, your mind is much brighter during that time. And then if you begin to have insights, your mind is not only bright, it's bright and clear. So when you have an insight, the darkness of delusion disappears for that period of time, and you have a mind which is like bright like the sun and clear like a diamond. So it's like, and apparently the more we can make our mind bright, the more merit it produces. So, and the really well practiced monks and nuns will know at a glance by your aura how much mindfulness you have, how much merit you have, how much insight you've had, by the quality, the extent of the radiance and the extent of the clarity. They can tell. So.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ajahn, for sharing.
Welcome.
Perhaps related to your response to that lady, I'd like to ask about spiritual joy or piti, mental rapture, but arising outside meditation. For instance, bowing before the Buddha, offering requisites, or even listening to the Dhamma talk.
Yeah.
That the mind enters rapture and tears start rolling down,
Right.
and it becomes more recurrent. And how should one deal with this?
You don't have to deal with it, you can rejoice in it. I suppose it can be a little bit embarrassing when you have tears streaming down your face, but it's okay. Yeah. I was at Bright Hill yesterday, went to meditate, and a lady came up and she said, I've been listening to some of your YouTube talks, and she said, oh, I feel awkward. I went, why do you feel awkward? And then the tears started rolling down her face, and she said, oh, I'm just happy to meet you, but I don't know what to say. I said, you don't need to say anything. I'm happy to meet you too. I think it's a good sign, you know. When I mentioned the other day that when Ajaan Chah first met Luang Por Chah, and he bowed to the Buddha quite beautifully, and Luang Por Chah, the first thing he said to Ajaan Chah, if I remember correctly, was, you bow beautifully. And then he said, if you knew the sacrifice Lord Buddha had made for us, you would cry every time you bowed. It's not a very common teaching, but we believe Luang Por Chah was an arahant. We're saying there is a wholesome type of tears of gratitude. There was once Ajahn Mahabua was describing his enlightenment experience, and he cried. It's because the rapture was so strong. But even as an arahant, because there still is a body with these faculties, his mind was liberated, I have no doubt. But when he's describing his liberation experience, tears rolled down his face. There are a whole bunch of people that said, oh, he can't be an arahant, arahants don't cry. This is really stupid, by the way. If you're not an arahant, don't start making opinions about what arahants are and aren't like. That would be my suggestion to you. The rapture, the Dhamma rapture, is one of the 7 factors of enlightenment, right? Piti. Even the arahants can cry when thinking of how wondrous and marvelous the Dhamma is. So I think it's a good thing. It means you're those factors of jhana, vitakka, vichara, piti, sukha, ekagata. So piti and sukha, the rapture and the tranquility, are the result of. So actually you are meditating when you're doing those things. When you're listening to Dhamma, it's Dhamma Vichaya. You're contemplating Dhamma. It's a type of formal practice. When you're making dana with faith, your mind is collected because you have faith in the value of the dana. So you are experiencing some factors of jhana while you're making offerings. You're experiencing some factors of jhana while you're listening to a Dhamma talk. It's a good sign. It means your practice is coming into other areas of your life in all postures. That's a good thing. And if other people judge you for it, it's okay. I had one long-term student, she's passed on a few years ago, and she would cry quite often, and her friend, she would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm feeling rapturous," and her friend would hit her on the shoulder and said, "It's not rapture, it's mental illness." He says, "You need to see a doctor." And that's, yeah, we all need friends like that, no? And a few years later, he came to me and he says, sometimes when I think of Phra Ajans and I think of the monks that I love and I think of the Buddha, I start crying, and I realize she wasn't mentally ill. She was experiencing and he was experiencing the same thing that she experienced a few years later. So, yeah. I used to sometimes, particularly when talking about the Buddha, like the Buddha becoming enlightened, the thousand Matadhara ascetics returning to Rajgir. About 10 years ago, I would start crying when talking about that, but I've trained myself that during the Dhamma talk is not the best time to cry with rapture. But I did have to train myself to kind of like the waves of just loving appreciation and gratitude for the Buddha were very strong. But I've learned now to, no, just focus on this, finish the sentence. And, yeah.
Hi Ajahn, I have a question about Upachara Samadhi.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't remember wrongly, I think you mentioned that Tan Ajahn Anan was asked whether jhana is required for Sotapanna, but I think the answer came back to say that not necessary, but you have to have a lot of Upachara Samadhi.
Frequent, yes.
So can you just explain a little bit about Upachara Samadhi and how do we know that we are in Upachara Samadhi?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning earlier on in the talk, when Tan Ajahn Anan describes that if you're having that 3, 4, 5 minutes of peacefulness and then some more hindrances come back, and then that's Kanika Samadhi, what they call momentary Samadhi. Upachara Samadhi, Tan Ajahn describes as 15 to 20 minutes with very little thought, and the occasional thoughts that you have tend to be wholesome, like the mind is with a wholesome meditation object, it's feeling quite a bit of contentment and tranquility, but it might have a wholesome thought like, oh, I want to go to such and such and make an offering, or maybe I should do that retreat. It'll be wholesome thoughts. And then after the 20 minutes or so, the thoughts will come back, habitual hindrances will come back. So Tan Ajahn was answering a senior monk's question, a senior Western monk, and he said, no, you don't have to have jhana to be a Sotapanna, but you would need Upachara Samadhi like daily as a kind of a foundation. And then you would also then need to apply directed thought. So particularly in the forest tradition, it's in relation to the body contemplation, seeing the body as elements. So you're taking the foundation of peacefulness that you have from the Upachara Samadhi to then have an active investigation. Body as parts, body as elements, then that's the wisdom inclining the mind to Samadhi. The mind can have then more Samadhi and an insight if a person's able to separate awareness, that if a practitioner is able to see the elements truly as an element, for example, bones as bones and bones as earth, and then separate the awareness of that which knows from that, there can be quite a big letting go. And then once a person has attained to stream entry, jhana is much easier. The unshakable faith is there, and much of the delusion has been exploded out of the mind. So from that point on, Tan Ajahn explained that jhana is quite common for stream enterers. So.
Any more questions?
I'd like to ask one more question. Could Ajahn explain the concept of Eka Dhamma and Eka Chitta?
Which one?
Eka Dhamma and Eka Chitta, and one Dhamma, one Chitta, and is the Chitta without defilements enduring and amata deathless?
Is the chitta without defilements when?
Is the Chitta without defilements amata or deathless?
In the deathless. So I'm not familiar with that. Actually not familiar. That's not a Dhamma that I have studied or contemplated. I don't know if I can contemplate it, but I don't know if I can comment on it. But in terms of does the mind that's realized the deathless have kilesa? No. No, the kilesa have been let go of in stages in the process of realizing the deathlessness. And normally how it's described is the mind will experience stream entry. Tan Ajahn Anan describes that that's not a momentary experience, that's usually a 2 or 3 day phenomenon. So that's important to know, because if people think they're a stream enterer and they're not, that can be a bit dangerous. You can have very valid, very profound insight, and it's great to rejoice about that, but one has to be careful not to assume But if a person does, if the mind does, the phrase is flip over, gotrabu vinyana, if the mind does enter the nibbana stream, then a lot of the delusion is removed from the mind at that stage, and then there can be no more than 7 births. And then the next stage, sakkatakami, the greed and hatred is still there, you see, but the commitment to precepts is rock solid, because this person understands wholesome, unwholesome, has faith in the Buddha and the goodness of Dhamma. The next stage, developing, deepening the insight, the greed and the hatred gets significantly reduced, the stage of sakkatakami. And then at the stage of anagami, the greed and the hatred is completely uprooted. It's important to know actually that some vanity is still present, like grasping at things as a self, as a habitual tendency. Like the practitioner knows they've had the insight, they can recollect the insight, they can contemplate things as not self, but that feeling of being a self remains, and it's only at arahant. So if this is a mistake that people can make when they practice and they try to destroy the sense of self. It's not going away until arahantship, and it's not the kind of thing you should be doing in the beginning stages of practice. It'll make you go crazy. You have to understand what a self-view is and how it works. You have to understand and see it as a convention, not believe it, not be completely deluded by it, but don't try to destroy it. And that's just more self, actually. A self that's going to destroy the self, it doesn't work. You have to have insight into it being a convention. But yes, if a person is realized the amata dhamma, realize the deathless, that person is an arahant. So they don't have any grasping at delusion anymore. But a practitioner will glimpse it before that. That's what stream entry is. They will experience it for a period of time. But then some of the remaining kilesa and attachment comes back. And then it's a process of deepening it. Of course, there's practitioners who, there may be certain types of practitioners that wanted to meet the Buddha, wanted to become enlightened under a Buddha, and they seem to attain quickly. And personally, I suspect that many of those ones that we read about in suttas were probably stream enterers already. So they're listening and they listen to one verse and they become arahants, or they are probably established already. That's my personal suspicion. So. So it's important to understand that the Khanika Samadhi leads to the Upajjhara Samadhi leads to Appana Samadhi, it's all Samadhi. And that's how Ajaan Anan teaches it, and I really appreciate that he doesn't have a large focus on trying to get jhana, that it's actually by appreciating the Samadhi that you have and doing it more and more, it just deepens by itself, and then at one point it will become what we call Appana Samadhi. And then the Vipassana Jnanas become the temporary liberations, become the change of lineage, the Gotrabhu Vijnana, become the Sotapatti Magga. Small insights become bigger insights, become liberating insights. So all Samadhi is good, all insight is good. We just keep practicing, it gets deeper and deeper. Yes.
Ajahn, thank you very much for your very useful and encouraging talk. I have a question. You made reference, you kept making reference to samadhi as the mind getting collected, right? Instead of the word concentration.
Right.
So I'm trying to get to the meaning of what does that mean, the mind getting collected? How do we make sure that the process of the mind getting corrected is sama samadhi, it's the right way?
Right.
Yeah,
I tend not to use the word concentration because I think for modern people it gives, you kind of imagine like studying a textbook. It's like, concentrate. It's too heady and it's too willful. In my experience of samadhi, when the mind is with the meditation object, there's a sense of presence in the moment. It's not heady. It's a full body and mind experience of being present, truly present. And even the word collected isn't perfect because sometimes my experience of samadhi is the mind is collected, meaning it's centered, but many people experience rapture as meaning as that the mind becomes vast like the sky. So how do you describe that as collected when it starts to feel boundless? The thing that's collected is the presence of mind is collected. The center of the awareness does have a center. And it's the absence of the five hindrances and the presence of the quality of peace, I think is a good. And of course the five hindrances won't just not be there like in an instant. It is the case that they will lessen and quieten down for most people, and then there will be a period where there's hardly any hindrances or no hindrances. But it's the quality of peace and coolness that I think is how we know it's Samma Samadhi, the absence of the hindrances and the quality of peacefulness. So if it's dull, that's not a good sign. We might be having a nice nap. There's a sense of extra clarity, extra presence, extra stillness. It's a very interesting, it's a wonderful experience of coolness yet full, of relinquishing things and yet feeling contentment. That's how I experience it.
Hi Ajahn,
Hello.
I really appreciate your talk just now. I think I really need that kind of talk.
Satu.
Thank you. You were saying about unshakable faith in the Buddha. May I know how does that look like to have that unshakable faith? Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's when we think of the Buddha, do you have any doubt that he was liberated? So it's like, for myself, I don't. I believe that bodhisattvas come into the world and practice and liberate their minds and become Buddhas. So I believe that Nibbana exists. I believe that the liberated state exists, and I believe that Buddhas realize that, past, present, and future, and I have no doubt about that. Now, we can't force ourselves not to have doubt. In the beginning, I've got 3 decades of practice. Part of why I don't have doubt about it is 3 decades of practice. And then when you read the suttas and develop an appreciation for the logical, common sense, reasonableness of it, the lucidity of it, the consistency of it, that this came from a Buddha's mind, it's very clear, it's very profound, very wise, very instructive, then this helps us to develop our faith in the Buddha. And if we can meet well-practiced practitioners who have actually liberated themselves following the path of practice of the Buddha, and we know them personally, I would say that would be a large factor in my unshakable faith, is that I believe I've met people who have accomplished the liberation that the Buddha accomplished, and also some insights that I've experienced by following Lord Buddha's instructions, where I have glimpsed some states without suffering. Yeah, and then that doesn't change. So it's like whenever I think of the Buddha, it's not like, I don't know if he never existed. I don't know if he really existed. Well, I don't know if he knew what he was talking about. I don't experience that kind of doubt. Some people, probably a lot of people do in moments, which is normal. But the Buddha himself says, practice for yourself until you see for yourself. So that's how we develop unshakable faith. It's like seeing that what he recommended actually works. I have less suffering. I have more well-being. I am glimpsing deeper and deeper peace through following his instructions. Then one naturally feels more trust. And then if you have some insights and glimpse what he realized, that's the point where one has unshakable faith. Yeah.
Maybe I can say that I have no doubt in that sense at all. But yet, when I think of the Buddha, I have no words to say what I want to say, actually. I wish I can have... I do respect the Buddha very much, but I feel... I have no word to say. It's okay, let me think about it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Keep practicing. What Buddha is pointing to is inside us. Inside us. So if ever the mind which is involved in conventional reality starts thinking about the historical person, and if you're looking at 84,000 verses, you can probably find some fault. You can probably find something to doubt. You can probably find something that you don't like. But that's not the point. The Buddha is saying there are these Four Noble Truths. There is this Eightfold Path that if you cultivate, you will experience more and more peace and you will liberate yourself from suffering. And that's what he wants us to do. But the thinking mind, if we let it go, will always make us miserable. So it's not something that you're going to resolve on the level of concepts and knowledge. It can help, but all of the suttas, the way I understand them, is a map. But you have to walk. It's an instruction about how to practice. You have to practice. And when you're walking the path of Dhamma and you're doing your practice, then you will have the insight, and then you have no doubt that what the Buddha is teaching is true. But we have to practice to that point. And then we'll understand. See, doubt is one of the 5 hindrances, and we will experience it very often in all sorts of areas. So you can't forbid yourself from having doubt. It's one of the 5 hindrances. It's one of the things that we all struggle with. But you resolve your doubt with your own experience and your own insight. And it comes from practice. So, yeah.
Okay, so Ajahn, I have a question. So you mentioned the practice of Devanusati, right?
Right.
How do you know if the blessings have come from Devanusati? And how does it differ from the practice of Buddhanusati?
I have an ache in my leg. I have a Vajiranyanamuni. Excuse me. 2 hours I've been sitting here. 1 second. I think you can get a similar result from both practices, but that people have, this is the thing about people having different character types and different affinities. Probably we've all done different types of practices in our past lives, and depending on the type of practice we've done, then we will get different results when we do those practices. So for some people, to think of the Buddha is too kind of illustrious, otherworldly, aloof. When you think of the Buddha, you think, well, he's pure, he's in enlightenment, he's enlightened, he's not here anymore. That's actually erring on the side of nihilism, and the Buddha said his teaching is not nihilism. He attained to the deathless, he didn't die. So actually the liberated mind in the liberated state is there, but he said it's not eternalism either. It's a very, very subtle thing. Some people who have a bit of an intuitive understanding of that, for the deathless and for Buddhas having attained to the deathless, thinking about that gives rise to rapture, and if they chant the praises of the Buddha, they may feel very rapturous and very kind of loved and supported by the brightness of the highest Dhamma. But for some people don't get that result. It's too abstract or too obtuse. Other people to imagine that there is a Tushita Deva who has metta, who's destined to be a Buddha, that seems closer. And so those people, when they recollect Indra, Sakadevaraja as a Sotapanna, or Maitreya as a Bodhisattva, destined for Buddhahood, it will be a feeling of gladness, joy, and just a sense of energetic uplift. And I think with the Buddhanusati, I do this quite often, the 180 episodes chant, and I go to Bodh, I practice a lot in Bodh, and for me the Buddha blessing is more like pristine clarity. It's just a bright, pristine clarity. So, and yeah, but we have to be quite diligent and energetic and to get those results, or to feel that. So,
Yeah. Hello, Ajahn. I have a question. It's regarding merits. So I recall reading some suttas that said, or Jakarta Till saying something like, by the power of my merits, may so and so this and that. Or for example, by the power of this truth, may this and that, or so and so. So I recall there was a story about one of the Buddha's past life when he was born as a bird, and he was trapped in a forest fire. So he invoked this truth for his protection. So the radius where he was in, it was not touched by fire. So I was just curious, like in this, it's very powerful to say that by the power of my merits, may this and that happen. Yeah. So I was just wondering, did the Bodhisattva actually evoke this power or this truth by uttering out the words, or did he actually thought about it? Because there's so much thoughts that may appear in our mind. Then what was it that differentiates that? Oh, okay, this thought is the exact.
So I think the Bodhisattva, a well-advanced Bodhisattva, that when they're talking about a Jataka tale about the past life of a Bodhisattva, is that's not an ordinary being. So as a bird, he would have had awareness of his merit, and he would have had the power of reflection. And it would have been a thought. I don't think he would have been saying it through his beak, but he would have known that he had vast merits. And this is called Satcha Adhitan. So it's where you combined truth, Barami, with determination, Barami, and then also you can determine your merit to ripen in a certain way. And so we can't do that. Like a fire might be coming and we might say, due to the power of my virtue, may the fire not touch me. But if you can see the exit sign, it's better to go. But the Bodhisattva could do that, and but one of the things Thais do all the time is, like, suppose they have a particular goal, and they'll go and make a particular type of merit, and then they do make a request, but it's usually like oftentimes, due to this merit, may I get the promotion? Due to this merit, may I get my profits? And it often comes with, so that I can make more merit. It's like they do have this kind of, what's the word, bargaining, and but they do make a wholesome donation, and if it's a wholesome aspiration, it's okay to do something wholesome and make the wholesome aspiration. Due to this merit, may I have more opportunities to do retreats. Due to this merit, may I be able to go on a pilgrimage. So I remember for my one experience I had, I suggested to Ajaan Chah in my first pansa, with my third pansa, I suggested, Ajaan Chah, I think you should lead a pilgrimage to India, and you should take some junior monks. It would be good for our faith, and it would be much more longer to make it as monks for a long time. The following year, he went to India, and he took along 5 monks, and he did not invite me. And I was hurt and offended. And I said, Ajaan, it was my idea, and you didn't invite me. And he said, I have no doubt, Ajaan Achalo, that in the future, he said, you will be invited to India. And so after my 5th pansa, I decided to walk a period of Tudong. I walked from Wat Nong Pah Pong to Pratat Panom, and then to Sakon, paid respects to Luang Por Man's relic, paid respects to the relic. So I thought, okay, well, I might not be able to go to India yet, but I can pay respects to holy sites and relics here within Thailand. So I paid respect at Pratat Panom. I think it's a rib relic of Lord Buddha. Paid respects at Luang Por Man's relic. And then I paid respects at the 4 Buddhas' footprints in Merim. There's a place with the Buddhas of the 4 footprints of 4 Buddhas. And I made an adhitan. Due to this merit, may I be invited to the 4 holy sites. And 2 days later, I was. So, Ajaan Chah was right. But we have to work for it sometimes, to work for it.
I have another follow-up
Yes.
question.
Who is it? Okay, I
sorry.
think you have a question as well, do you? Yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's me again. So as I actually have this dilemma when it comes to wishing, right? I always find that it's very bad if I wish for something for myself.
No.
Then whereas if I were to wish for others, I'll feel very glad.
Right.
So I don't know whether if I were to wish something for myself, is that like greed? And I feel just very bad. So I don't know how to make of it. Thank you.
So we all have to have what I would call healthy self-care. And when you have loving kindness for all beings, you can't exclude yourself. You have to understand in that phrase, may all beings be happy, you are one of them. And when we spread loving kindness, when we generate loving kindness, we have to actually have it here in order to radiate it outwards. This is where the battery is charged, and it radiates from there. So we must have the ability to hold loving kindness here to radiate it out. And then making wishes so that you have what you need. I mean, it's a graded scale, right? Due to this merit, may my billion become 5 billion. That's not so good, right? But due to this merit, may I have enough income and opportunities to take breaks to do retreats, I think that's fine, you know. It's a matter of middle way, reasonableness. Yeah.
Good evening, Achalo.
Evening.
Thank you for your insights.
You're welcome.
My question, I'm curious, for a person who's suffering from an early onset of dementia or already experiencing dementia, can that person still benefit from meditating given an unpredictable mind? And can that person also benefit from chanting? I would love your thoughts on how such a person can still benefit from practicing it despite his or her condition.
It is much better if a person has practiced for decades before that happens. If the mind has had many experiences of finding space to rest, separate from thoughts, that's very, very helpful, because it can be the case that as dementia advances, the person is okay. They know where to place their mind in a restful place. If we're starting at that stage, it's harder. But one of the things that I would recommend would be to play chanting by their bed, or just have good wholesome chanting playing in the background, play Dhamma talks, while they can still understand those concepts, discuss Dhamma with them, talk about death and rebirth as something not to be scared of, and make sure there's presence of mind when it's time to go, don't be scared. I think, yeah, playing chanting in the background, often playing Dhamma talks. If you can get them to become familiar with that, trust that, like that, it becomes something that they can relax when they hear in the background. I think that's very helpful. Certainly take them to the temple and get them to make merit if they can. If they get them out of the house, get them moving a bit and doing things that brighten their mind. Yeah. Of course, if it's a parent, we can make merit for them. We have a close karmic connection. We can make merit and share merit with them. That's also helpful. Yeah. I have heard many stories of when the mind is about to leave this life of a person with dementia, that in their last day or so, lucidity returns and they do know. It's almost like as the mind is letting go of its attachment to the physical body and whatever it is in the brain that's affecting self-awareness, people will have some lucid moments and recognize people and can have an auspicious death despite the challenges. Yeah. I think all of us should take some steps to try to prevent dementia. My mother's 86. She walks 8 kilometers a day. I think it's part of why she doesn't have dementia. She lives alone. She drives by herself. She buys her food. She cooks her food, and her memory is good. But she walks for 8 kilometers a day. And I think it's that kind of motor skills, peripheral vision, using the brain, the whole nervous system, staying active. I think when we're too sedentary, that's not good for the organism. So, and, certain things we can do to detox as well. The heavy metals. I think there's been some studies that show there's a link between aluminium and dementia. And there are certain supplements that you can take that detox heavy metals from the body. I think zeolite, it's a kind of a mineral from lava stone, takes heavy metals out of the body. So doing some detox. We live in quite a polluted world now, so detoxing regularly. I do this. I do a 1-month zeolite detox each year. I've tried a few different types of detoxes. The reason I like this one, it has no side effects. So you don't get a headache or drowsiness or feel bad. It just absorbs. It has some kind of ion or something that sticks to metal, and the metal goes out with urine and excrement, and you don't notice anything. So I take a zeolite capsule for a month, one a day for a month for a year, every year. And I recommend if, some preventative care.
Ajahn, one last question.
No. Okay, one more. Last one. I have gifts. I have gifts for you as well.
Namo Buddhaya. Ajahn, I have a question about the third fetter. I think I'm using the right word, Sangyojana. The third one, Silabata Paramasa. Can you kindly explain what's the deep level? Because as Buddhists, we in the scripts we can see that Acha Buddha go with like acting like cow, acting like animals, like that. That was the explanation that we can see. But what's the deeper level explanation on that
Yes.
Silabata Paramasa?
So one of the things that a stream enterer goes beyond is a superstitious belief in rites and rituals. And that's one of the ways it's described. So the belief that the ceremony or the mantra or the offering will get you liberated, that's kind of like a grasping that that thing is what will liberate you. The thing we understand is there are skillful rites and rituals that we can use to develop mindfulness. So most Buddhist traditions have the offering of incense, the offering of flowers, the offering of candles, and bowing, for example. So it's that's not a... And it's probably the case that if you grasp that deludedly, it's a superstitious rite and ritual. If you think that you offer 1 million candles, then when you finish offering 1 million candles, you'll be an arahant. That's the wrong understanding. But if you understand that you're offering light in honor of the brightness of a purified, liberated mind, and that you're doing that to brighten your own mind, it's a skillful use of a ritual. And when a person has an insight, the thing about the abandoning of the attachment to rites and rituals is when the person has an insight, there was a lot of presence of mind, there was a lot of clarity, there was mindfulness and clear comprehension. They know the practices that they were doing that led to the insight. So after that, they know which practice led to the insight, which mental faculties. So it's like they know that it was a combination of sati, samadhi, and panya that led to the insight. And if various rituals might support a person in having better sati or increasing merits, like increasing merit is skillful. So we can do certain things to increase merit. Lord Buddha said, don't criticize people who do things for making merit. It's synonymous with happiness. We all need merit. It supports us in samsara. But we don't believe that the merit alone liberates us. The merit ripens as having a good birth, opportunities to practice. But then you have to practice. And it's your sati, your samadhi, and your panya working together to see through ignorance and delusion. And once a person has had some of that insight, then they'll understand the rites and rituals are helpful, but that's not where it's at. It's mental factors that have been cultivated and largely in meditation. So, yeah.
One thing. So the first three fetters are interrelated, is it?
You don't need to understand the theory of the fetters so much.
I mean,
you need to contemplate the three characteristics until you have an insight. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Just keep meditating, keep contemplating those characteristics. When you have the insight and the fetters go, you'll understand it. You can't think the fetters away. The fetters fall away as a result of insight and concentration. And when you experience it, you'll know you won't have any doubts about it. So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's what my teachers say. Just contemplate anicca, focus on those three characteristics. Meditate a lot until you really see it clearly. You will have the insight, the fetters will fall away.
Thank you.
And then you'll have to focus on the greed and the hatred, uprooting that. But you will have had the insight into not self. So too.
Okay, so we thank Ajahn for coming to Palelai to give us the Dhamma talk. very interesting sharing today, and also answering our questions. Let us say sadhu 3 times together to rejoice in all these merits. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.